The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod, and I'm thrilled to be here with you, Nancy. And I'm in a different place today.
Yes, where are you?
I am actually in the new control room for the Autism Network, which we have not given people a tour yet. And I've never done the show from the control room before, so this is fascinating. But we're having some internet issues in my office, so I'm here in the control room. I said earlier this morning, the universe is telling us that we got to get the show all the way back in the studio, so it's speaking loudly.
It looks very high tech in back of you.
Well, this is, I should swing it all around so that you could see where Traven's sitting, but I'm not going to throw that at him right now. But another time we'll do a show where we'll show everybody our new digs as the Autism Network and, getting things up and running. We are now doing Ask Dr. Doreen from the studio, but we're not doing the other shows, Autism Live or this show or any of the other shows from the studio yet. But I said this morning, the universe is telling us it's time. So hopefully very soon we'll be able to do that. Are you well, Nancy? You just got back from a big trip.
Yeah, I was in the Caribbean, in the Turks and the Caicos. It was amazing.
I can't wait to hear all about it. And I hope at some point you're going to share pictures with us.
It was beautiful, absolutely stunning.
I love it. I hope you've come back rejuvenated.
I did. I'm still a little jet lagged. Just got back on Sunday. So
wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. Thrilled to be here, and we have not had our fill of Wyart in quite a while. So I hope that you're going to share that with us. I do have to give one programming note to folks that this program, we are pre-recording this the night before you're seeing it. So on Thursday morning when you're seeing this premiere live, we did record it last night, and that is how we do Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. But I'm watching with you right now, so please still interact, write in. Tell us your thoughts, your feelings, your questions. You're going to love our guests. We got a great guest coming up in a little while. I just love it when we have dads on the show, Nancy. We've said that for a long time, right? And this, I can't wait to talk to this dad because he's got good information that everybody needs to hear. But want to remind all of you that you're watching it live. If you're watching it live right now, it's on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or a dozen other sites that Traven just showed you. It will podcast later on today and be available as a free download wherever you get your podcasts. Remember that if you want the audio podcast, go to all those podcast places where you get your podcast. If you really want to watch the video, then we're asking you to please, we're only streaming the video for the podcast on YouTube anymore. So please check out the video there. But for everything else, if you're taking us on the walk, the run, the car, please get that wherever you get your podcasts. That was my disclaimer. Now, can we please be reinforced with Wyart?
Oh, I think I've got two paintings that he just did.
Okay.
This one is just called Cactus.
I love it.
Yeah, he did that about 2 weeks ago. And it's available for purchase if anybody's interested.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, nice and colorful, huh?
I love all the red, the juxtaposition of the red. It's really beautiful.
That's a Christmas cactus.
I love it.
And then the other one, the next one is a sea turtle.
Oh.
And the story behind this is on my vacation, I saw lots of sea turtles. And my host, who had me stay at their villa, and there were also two other couples there. I was the odd person out, not being part of a couple, but everybody made me feel very welcome. I wanted to give them something for having me on such a spectacular trip. So I had Wyatt paint this. That's going to be a gift for them.
I love it, Nancy. I
And then
absolutely.
there are two other versions which he's still working on. That I'll get to the other two couples just as a thank you for having me on such a spectacular trip.
I love it. And I also love how the signature on it almost is like you could miss it if you weren't looking for it. It's almost like more of the seaweed. I love the play of the light in the back and how different the color of the back fin is than the front. It's just kind of amazing. And I always love the expressions on the animals that he does. Just beautiful
Thank you,
work.
Shannon.
And of course, we've said before on the show, you can see if you're watching, he's available on Instagram at Wyart_autism and on Facebook as Wyart, and that's WYArt autism. And Nancy, he does commissioned work, yes?
He does, yes, lots of commissions. He does dog portraits, cat portraits. He's done a couple of human portraits. So if anybody's interested in commissioning, they can contact us at that Instagram and Facebook address.
What a lovely gift to give someone that you know and love in the autism community. If they have a pet that they just love and adore, you can take a picture, send it to Nancy. Wyatt does a painting, and you're helping to foster a young artist while you're giving a gift that is really beautiful and important and probably going to be worth a lot more than what you paid for it. In terms of memories, but also because this is a budding artist. So
Thank you,
definitely
Shannon.
check it out, you guys. Why
Yeah,
art?
all
Absolutely.
all the proceeds from his artwork goes to his art lessons with
Which is
his
amazing.
brilliant teacher Paola.
And and we have to be honest, that's quite an expense, Nancy.
Yeah,
And
she's not
um
inexpensive.
yeah, but worth it. Absolutely worth it. So wonderful. Thank you for sharing my art with us. And now it's that time of the week, or the time of the month when we foray into the news to see what's going on in the news. A lot going on, not all of it sunny and happy, but on my list, I have a starting with an article that I saw in the Deseret News. For those of you who
What?
know,
Where is the Deseret News?
it's Utah, and I spent some time living in Utah, so I'm pretty familiar with the Deseret News. And this article, written by a sister, with a little bit of a plea to all of us to be thinking about not people who are non-speaking and how they communicate, and making sure that we're having them be a part of the conversation. I just was so moved by this article, Nancy.
I was too. It was a very well written article. As you said, written by a sister of a young man on the autism spectrum. Her name is Julia Chu Knutson, and she began the article from the moment she found out that her brother, um, using a new therapy called spelling to communicate, was able to express himself in ways that she and her family never dreamed possible.
Yeah. I don't want to give too much away because it's really well written, you guys, but there's a part where she talks about her self as she was the older sibling, and she talks about how she felt about her brother and what she thought he understood and what she didn't, what he didn't understand. Her mother contacting her and saying, "You're not going to believe this," and the teacher asking him to spell Massachusetts,
Yeah.
and him going through it, and each time he punched a letter with great effort that it took him to punch a letter, that each and every letter that he pushes in the Massachusetts, she tells you of the crumbling of the wall that she had built, saying that he didn't understand what they were saying in front of him, that he didn't know what was happening. It took my breath out of my body, and I felt the wonder and the pain that she felt as a sibling in that moment, realizing all these years he's been in there and he's understood everything we said and didn't have a way to tell us. The
Right.
shame of
Right.
that, and the joy of realizing that now he was going to be able to tell her. Just stunningly well written. So want to encourage people. And the message, I think, is vital, Nancy, that we do You always have said this to me. You've always said this to me. We always presume intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the first things I remember you saying to me. Oh, always presume intelligence. That a lot of people look at somebody who's non-speaking and assume all kinds of things. But you've always been at the forefront of that, Nancy, and I always think about that. Um, but there are still a lot of people who assume that if you're not speaking, it means you have nothing to say. And we know that isn't true. Those of us who've met many people who have found the way to communicate, we know it's not true. In fact, it's quite the contrary. These folks have a lot to say that is vital for us to listen to.
Right. She talks about uh, beautifully expresses how for the first 15 years of her brother's life, he was misunderstood and underestimated. And she goes on to argue for non-speaking autistic voices to be the leaders in a different kind of conversation about non-speaking autism. That we
Absolutely.
should listen to those individuals themselves.
I was so moved by it. It's very well written. I can't wait to see what else she writes, but a beautiful, beautiful message. It will take you guys' breath away. Okay, and what's our next story, Nancy?
The next article is a bit dense, I have to say, Shannon. I tried to wade my way through this. It's from Hindawi, which is a journal.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where that originates of. And the headline is Severity of Child Autistic Symptoms and Parenting of Children with Autism Spectrum Disorder in USA. Cross-cultural differences.
Yeah. And it's the actual study. That's why it's dense. And there was so much, and I'm not going to pretend that I understand every aspect of it either, Nancy, because it's not the media's. We're going to disseminate for you right now, but this is the actual study. But the big takeaway from this is that they had a group of kids that were on the spectrum in the US and a group of kids in Japan, and they asked the parents a lot of questions about them and then rated the parents' answers to a bunch of different things, like how severe they thought their children were, and what kinds of skills their children were having difficulty with, and what kind of stress they had. And the big takeaway that they were surprised about was that the stress that you feel when your child is on the spectrum is not a direct correlation to the severity of your child's symptoms. That your child could be doing quite well and you could still have a great deal of stress, and that your child could be pretty severely impacted and you might be somebody who's dealing better with the stress. And that went across both cultures in the US and in Japan. So they found that really interesting. There were other things that they looked at that I found fascinating. That it said that here in the US, we were rating our children as being more severe than with the same symptoms that the folks in Japan were. And they were saying that our kids here in the US were often, I believe, I hope I'm not misquoting, that our kids showed a higher social skills quote than the kids in Japan, but we were more stressed about it in the US, which sort of is interesting, if nothing else. But I think it's significant because we've said this for a long time, that when your child is diagnosed on the spectrum, there's stress. And obviously, there are different challenges for different families, but everybody's entitled to their stress. And we all need to be seeking ways to mitigate the stress. And maybe the reason why it didn't correlate is that maybe we've gotten smart about getting help for families where their children have more severe symptoms. And maybe we've forgotten to do that for all the families. Maybe.
Interesting, difference of being able to cope with. I have families, one who on Facebook, co-mother of a young man named Alex. Years ago, Activate gave a grant of both autism and Down syndrome. and he is in a wheelchair. And the family vacation, and he choked, which has happened to him on a number of times. The mom had to do it, and he aspirated and had to go to the hospital and is now on it. I just marveled at the strength of this. I don't know that I would have it in me to be as strong as she is. Her name is Cindy Burns, so she wouldn't mind me saying.
And yet, Nancy, you've been through some pretty harrowing things.
It's true. I've been through some pretty harrowing things, but nothing like the struggle she has. And then I have another friend whose son is 28 and he is nonverbal, and he is in a residential facility. She placed him there when he was 8 years old. So he's been there for 20 years. Well, he was having a tantrum and he broke his tibia, which necessitated him having to be hospitalized and surgery performed. And they've had to keep him in silence during this time. And once again, you think there, but for the grace of why. And I marvel at Melissa's strength. And I marvel at the strength for her because she knew she was not equipped to continue to have him in their home with their other son because of his aggressive behaviors many years ago. And she wrote a beautiful short story that she shared with me about the process of placing him in a residential facility. But I look at moms like that and I am awed and amazed by their courage and their tenacity, because I know it can't be easy.
But the irony of that, Nancy, is that we all look at you and say the same thing, because you've been through some pretty tough times. And, just between losing your husband in the middle of all this, and that, and then Wyatt having some additional things added on to his diagnosis. I don't want to tell his story here. That's up to you. But some of the things that you've been through, I know I was like, girl, I don't know. It's a lot. I think we all look at other people and go, I don't know how I would do that. Right. But isn't it amazing? Aren't we lucky to be in a community of such amazing, strong people who find a way? And it just reminds me how important it is to offer support to all of the people in the community, which is one of the things we hope to do through this show. Obviously, it can't be everything, but to provide information and inspiration to help people to find the thing that will help them, which our guest is going to help us in just a minute to do that. Maybe we should move on to the next news story. What have you got, Nancy?
Your eyes could reveal if you have ADHD or autism.
Really Isn't this fascinating?
Yeah, out of the University of South Australia. Gives new meaning to the term "the eyes tell it all." The eyes may be able to signal neurodevelopmental problems, and ADHD. There's something in the name of it, the actual.
Yeah.
And it's using electroretinal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a diagnostic test of the retina in response to a light stimulus. Researchers said children with ADHD had greater total ERG energy. They had lower ERG energy.
Yeah. So this I found that fascinating.
Way of measuring that could be another diagnostic tool.
Well, and not only that, that bit of information that when you have ADHD, that your number is higher for this, and when you have an autism spectrum, it's lower. That's a clue. That's a clue that there's something signal that's happening between your eye and your brain. And I hope they're doing more research on it, because I think maybe that isn't just a diagnostic thing. Maybe that's something that will give us more information to get to the more mysterious sides of this so that we understand how the brain is interacting. That's what I'm hopeful for. And then I think we had one
Yes.
more study, Nancy. And I
I
don't
have
know if
another one.
I'm losing you or you're kind of going in and out for me. And I don't know whether it's my internet
Fine.
connection. Okay.
Oh,
This one I've
yes. This was a study out of Sage Journal. Yeah, mental health availability for autistic youth. This was a study looking at developmental disabilities and their ability to access services.
Yeah. And this is just a microcosm, right? Because we're just looking at this in New York City. But
Right.
when you think about the fact that, you know, when we look over and over, when we're talking about studies, Nancy, and we're looking at what are the number one causes of death for people that are over the age of 18 with autism, and we see that depression, but then also that this population is dying of things that they shouldn't die of. And one of the things that this article talks about is
Right.
if you don't have the ability to communicate what you need, you're less likely to get it. Doesn't that sound like a big duh to you?
Right. Absolutely.
So I think what's
That's what I thought.
and we know depression and suicide is a big factor for this age range. And I'm sorry, Nancy, we're having like some sort of disconnect. So I'm hearing you later. I don't mean to be over talking you, but I think what the takeaway for this is that it is so imperative that we continue to provide training to mental health professionals to be looking for clues and having a checklist of when somebody exhibits this behavior, make sure that you offer them these services. Otherwise, they're not likely to get them. I just can't even, you know, that is the duh heard round the world. I don't know why we have to explain that to people that are in the mental health position to offer services, but apparently it needs to be explained because there are lives at stake here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we have Nancy. Okay.
We need to Can you hear me, Shannon?
I'm not. No, you're going in and out, and I don't know whether it's just me or if it's everything. But you got to be getting frustrated. Imagine as frustrating as it is for us that we're trying to communicate through this medium with sketchy internet today. Imagine how frustrating it is for a teen or a young person on the spectrum who needs help and support and is having difficulty communicating and getting access to those services. This frustration that we are feeling is just a small amount of what they must be feeling. But I'm frustrated. Are you frustrated, Nancy? I want to take my internet and shove it into the Atlantic Ocean. Okay. Anyway, let's shove it into the ocean. Anyway, all right. Okay, so I want to get on to our guest because he's been waiting patiently, and I'm so excited to have him here with us. Nancy, if you have internet, but it looks like you don't. I might. Normally, we love it when Nancy does the introductions because she just does it so much better than I do. But Nancy, let's see. Do you have internet at the moment? Go for it. Introduce Jim for us.
Okay, our first guest is, as Shannon said earlier, an autism dad. His name is Jim Hamilton, and he is an advocate. And his career, he has been a high frequency quant trader, which I'm not exactly sure what even that is. So
I had to Google it, but I did. And guess what? I still don't understand. I still don't understand. You'll have to explain it to us. I Googled it, though. I did look it up.
Okay. He's been a high frequency quant trader for a Chicago firm. And he has a background in statistics, computer science, and finance. He's a brainiac. And he is an advocate. And we're going to hear a little bit about his advocacy for autism, for ADA, and his work with insurance advocacy.
Yes.
And his name is
Specifically,
Jim Hamilton. Yeah, his name is Jim Hamilton. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Hey, how are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good to have you here, Jim. First of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your family members?
Yeah. So my wife and I just moved back here to Kansas, but we have our son John, who was diagnosed with ASD when he was 2. He's now 7. Daughter Cece, 4 years old, and son James, 6 months.
So you are Jim, and you have a son named James. I can relate to my husband is Jim, and our son is James. It's a thing. It's a trend. Good luck to you. We've had difficulty with it. I hope it goes smoother for you than it has for us. But it's all good. It's a great name. You gotta love
absolutely.
the name in all of its iterations. So maybe end the controversy for us here. I did look up quant. And try to what a quant trader was. I'm not going to pretend I understand it. What in the heck is that?
I don't know. You know, my wife struggles with it too. People ask, and I just I've told her, yeah, I'm just a trader. It's just a little more math, a little more computer science, but just a trader.
Okay, because it was something because the quant stands for quantitative, right?
Or quantitative analyst. My point in saying that was I have absolutely no experience in behavioral health or anything related to my son's diagnosis. So I was swimming, I was without a paddle there, so I had to catch up quick, just like every other parent, really.
Tell us a little bit about his diagnosis. You mentioned that he was diagnosed with autism when he was 2 years old. Tell us a little bit about that experience and what that was like for you.
Yeah, so my wife is she was a kindergarten teacher here in Kansas, and then we moved to Chicago as well. She went to school for special ed, so she saw the signs when he was 6 months old. He wasn't rolling over. He couldn't hold his head up. We did the helmet thing. So it was quickly diagnosed, by her. And I kind of looked at it as, you mentioned this in your book, but the first stage is, it's the 5 stages, right? The first stage is denial. So I was definitely in the denial stage there, but and up until we got the diagnosis, I was certain that my wife was wrong, but of course she wasn't. So yeah, it was tough, but it's my wife dealt with it by reading a bunch of books, and I couldn't. The books didn't help me because they were more pep talky, which is great, but that wasn't what I was looking for. So I was looking for more information. And had I known about your book then, I would have enjoyed that. But I didn't. I read. There were no practical guides, so I just dug in deep to the scientific papers and kind of caught up that way. So.
Well, I think your tale is very familiar tale, right? I think a lot of, especially dads, it's not across the board. I know at least one friend that she was the one in denial and her husband was the person saying, honey, I think you got to look at this. But I think more often than not, it's the dad that is in denial. We know Rodney Peete, the title of his book was Not My Son. Talk about, I call it the river in Egypt denial. But I think it's hard for the dads, Jim. I think I think it's a hard thing for them, and we see a lot of dads who struggle with the acceptance of it. But you look like somebody to me that kind of quickly got on board. Is that the truth of it, or did it take you a while after the diagnosis?
Yeah, no, I mean, the next day I had bought an ABA textbook and I was trying to, really figure out where I could pitch in here. So once we got it, once it was true,
who had told you about ABA though? Because when they diagnosed, did they tell you about ABA at that appointment?
No, and you're absolutely right. It wasn't an ABA textbook that I got. I read some papers and I didn't know about ABA for months after the fact. But it was, and it was frustrating what we did first. We went through a specific type of therapy that was not ABA. And, it's kind of beyond the scope here, but it wasn't, I didn't love it. But we quickly found a ABA and found a good spot.
So you found ABA how long after the diagnosis?
We got diagnosed when he was just under 2, maybe 18 months, I think maybe a few months before he turned 2, and we found ABA by the time he was 2. So we did move quick, and we were quick to interview and test out ABA, but we had found our favorite ABA place by the time he was 2.
Here's what I want to know, Jim. What was it that you found out about ABA that you went, this is the thing that we're going to go get? And why did that become so important to you?
Well, you mentioned my background, but I'm big into data. My argument is, if you're not measuring it, it's not science. And if it's not science, then what are we doing here? So what I love about ABA is, yes, these are qualitative skills, and yes, it is difficult to measure them, but you can measure them. My son struggles with screaming, just kind of impulsively, and his therapist developed tools to monitor that. We've got the voice level system, whatever it is. So, but you can measure outbursts, and we can have an incidence, plot of this, and have a moving average of it over the last weeks, and we can see that, yeah, these tools are working. This is when we started to do, when we started to implement this tool, and yeah, after the next, extinction burst and all that, it did actually come down. So it is measurable, and it is, even though maybe at first blush it feels like it shouldn't be.
And you said, Jim, you all had a goal to get John into a private school that would allow an ABA therapist. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, so for us, it was important that we have ABA therapy in school, because in my mind, ABA therapy is the gold standard in treatment for a child with autism. And maybe that's controversial, but it's at least the easiest thing to get approved by insurance, let's say. And in Kansas, an IEP will get you speech, PT, OT, maybe some para time, maybe some special ed teacher pull-out time. But it is most often just that, it's pull-out time. And you mentioned this in your book. You say, if he's getting pulled out of math to learn speech, then what's the game? And big proponent of math. So it was not worth it to me to get speech, PT, and OT, which I feel like I could get on a Saturday or after school. I want to get schooling when I can get it. And the nice thing about ABA is we can pursue these goals while we're pursuing academic goals. They're not, and my insurance provider disagreed initially, at least, that they're not, that they can't be done in tandem. Well, they absolutely can. And in fact, they complement each other very well. So going the public school route, unfortunately, wasn't an option for us. Going the IEP route wasn't an option. I wanted ABA therapy and for personal reasons, we chose this particular private school. We wanted to go to this private school, and we wanted ABA therapy in the school. And it was a struggle. We had a struggle, one, getting the principal on board, and two, getting it passed through insurance. So, the struggle of getting it through the principal was, we had to teach her and her team what is ABA. So our BCBA volunteered their own time to come in and teach our first grade or our kindergarten teacher, some tools, observe them in class and teach her some tools. And they all kind of got on board. They saw, yeah, these are actually usable tools that we can use in the classroom, and it does mitigate behavior. So we got them on board with that. And then it was kind of showing them that we weren't going to be, we were going to be one of those parents. We're not going away. We're going to be, respectful but persistent. And then it was, we're meeting with them once a month, and it's, what are palpable, what are actual blockers? Give me actual things. So we got our RBT to take this 2-hour training course, or sign a waiver for confidentiality of other students, or a slip and fall waiver, adhere to a dress code. So there were like a litany of things that we had to get done, and we finally adhered to it. So we got to a place where the staff there was willing to let it happen. It sounds I'm saying it out loud. It sounds like a no-brainer, right? Why wouldn't a principal, why wouldn't a school want, why wouldn't they welcome free professional help for a student? But it is actually, this principal faced some significant headwinds. She was, going against tradition in this school system, and really my son is the pilot program for the whole school system for ABA in the classroom, and just for this like private network of schools in Kansas. So really, I'm grateful for this principal. She's done a lot of work, and she made really what I think is a courageous decision. So we got it approved by the school. Then the next bit was get it approved by insurance, and that's probably the most difficult part of the story, was because mid last winter we got provisional approval, and we thought, well, the battle's over, we won, right? So we just have to wait for the principal to approve, and she did by May, and we thought, okay, we're golden. So then we submit like formal requests for these services, and then we don't hear for a couple of weeks, and I figure that's fine. It's just the slow gears of insurance moving, right? But 2 weeks into it, my BCBA gets a call from a care coordinator, the case manager at my insurance company, and they set up a case consultation where an insurance PhD meets with my practicing BCBA and kind of pressured her to withdraw the in-school language of the request for services. And I had asked prior to attend this call. I wasn't allowed to attend this call. But my BCBA made, I think, a reasonable decision, which was to withdraw it, because what they said was, okay, well, if you leave it in there, we're going to deny it, and this kid's not going to get services all summer. So she made a reasonable decision. She withdrew it. My son got services for the summer, and then we're kind of at a loss for days. So days and hours we're on the phone trying to figure something out. I reach out to an insurance advocate, a special needs advocate, other ABA clinics in the area, try to see what's working. Nothing's working. And then just kind of, my wife's doing research on the side. She finds this PDF, and the PDF was written by Julie Cornack, friend of your show, by the Center for Autism letterhead, and it was specifically about ABA therapy in a classroom. And we thought, oh, this is great. This is exactly what we're talking about. And it had Julie's email address on the bottom. So my wife just kind of, we're grasping at straws. She sends an email to Julie. And we didn't know Center for Autism. And I mentioned to you guys earlier that we actually lived around the corner from the Center of Autism when we were in Chicago. So we didn't actually, and I didn't know that until, I heard Julie's name. So within an hour, Julie had responded, and with empathy and concrete, usable information. And she said this, and I know this after going back to your archives and watching her on your show this last week. She mentioned the Mental Health Parity Act, and she talks about having a button with mental health parity. Got mental health parity. I want to get one of those buttons. But in short, the reason it's applicable is, the act explicitly states non-qualitative treatment limitations, and it says, and I'll read it: restrictions based on geographic location, facility type, provider specialty, and other criteria to limit the scope or duration of benefits and services are not allowed. So that's exactly what we wanted, right? The scope in an academic setting, and it was, or facility type rather, and then the scope during academic hours. So it was hope, really. So we took that, and in the next week, we kind of crafted an addendum, a request to amend our services, and Julie responded to several more emails, which I really appreciate. But I'm writing this with my BCBA, and we're talking about, it's we have to prove medical necessity for ABA in the classroom. So we showed that there are we showed that there are certain behaviors that only present in the classroom that need to be addressed in the classroom, because this is the environment where they present. It cannot be done in a clinical setting, right? And if we want to use these tools to generalize across setting, well, we should probably generalize across the setting where he spends most of his time. So it makes sense. And then we were very explicit. The RBT is not going to pursue academic goals. He's going to pursue, ABA goals and paralleled academic goals. So so we proved in one page medical necessity, and in the second page I took this litany of quotes that the care coordinator gave me from the insurance company. She gave me she went through their guidelines and gave me a highlighted list of these are the reasons why we can't do it in an academic setting. So I cited each one of them, from their guidelines, and I said why each one of them did not, pertain to my son, or why it violated mental health parity, or violated Illinois state law. My insurer is in Illinois. So there's, specific Illinois state law that addresses this as well, which was, so it was a complete argument against both medical necessity of scope and you should absolutely, these are your objections and they're all wrong. And then, so we don't hear for a couple of weeks, and then, and this is the last bit, but we don't hear for a couple of weeks. And so I write the care coordinator at the insurance company, a very polite email, and I just said, obviously we'd love it if you could approve, but if you're going to reject, please let us know as soon as possible so we can get started on the appeals process. And that was all I said. And then the next day, there's a voicemail in our BCBA's, voicemail saying it was approved. So it was a victory for us. It was huge, but they couldn't have done it without Center for Autism, for sure.
But honestly, Jim, it's a victory for all of us. I got to tell you, because you're talking to two women who have been through countless IEPs. We've also been through them with other families. What do we hear the most, Nancy, when people have kids that are school age? People always say to me, how did you get an aide in the classroom? Now, we've been telling them for years about here are some steps you can do it in the public school. But in the private school setting, it's always been this really hard thing. And we've been saying, it's really hard because insurance won't pay for anything that's educational. Right. And I'm, we've got parents that are challenging even that. But the fact that you have come in and taken the very laws that they have written and held their feet to the fire to get them to provide those services at the school for those things that are medically necessary, you've helped not only your child, but you've helped so many children coming behind you. And I hope you and your wife know that, because that is huge.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't me, it was Julie for sure. But I think it's incredibly important that we have ABA therapy in the classroom. I mean, an IEP should provide that, and it doesn't, and that's really a travesty. But this is the type of therapy that my son needs. So having it in the classroom, I'm lucky that I'm coming along so late in this movement that these laws already exist. I can't imagine being one of those Arizona parents who had to fight to get this even approved or even recognized as a correct something that could be covered by insurance.
Well, Nancy and I both love Julie Cornack. She's amazing, yes. And she's been fighting really hard for all of our kids for a really long time. But I got to tell you, I know that Julie loves parents like you, Jim, who will take the information that she's been putting out there and run with it. And I loved what you said about we let them know that we weren't those parents who were going to go away. I think that's critical. And the fact that you wrote to them and said, if you're going to deny, would you do it quickly? Because we're already planning our appeal. You sent them a message that they went, oh, okay, they're not really going to go away. And Nancy, don't we both agree? That's what gets it done sometimes, is showing them that you're going to stand in the street, and if they're going to play chicken, they're going to lose.
Yeah, you have to be tenacious no matter what.
Yeah, what is it you say, Nancy? Be a dog on a pork chop?
Pork chop, yeah. Of course, in our case with my son, we were not able to get an ABA therapist with him in the public school. We tried for many years, and the district we were at prides itself on never letting a non-public school aide into the classroom, and we went for a time to a private school and had his ABA therapist funded through insurance for a number of years. But
That
we
was
were not
preschool
able.
though, right? Or that was actually elementary, right? Some of it?
That was elementary. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was even before they were paying it for at home or at the center, right, Nancy?
Right. That's right.
And then when the insurance reform came, then they sort of cracked down and said we're not paying for it at school anymore.
Right.
Make the school pay for it. We're paying for it at home now. And if
Right.
it's like the pendulum swings both ways, and the people who lose are the kids and the parents. Because Jim, I hope you'll talk a little bit about this. Had to have been stressful for you and your wife.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I'm, it kind of goes back to what we did right when we got the diagnosis. I'm more of a internalize it and try to come up with like objective, what can what are some specific things I can try to accomplish? So I was more focused on that. My wife was, she actually reached out to Center for Autism and Julie. So she actually got it done, but she was also similarly stressed. So it was tough. I think what she and I have kind of agreed on, or maybe implicitly agreed on this, is that we're just not going to take no for an answer, or we're just not, what's the real cost when appealing this or taking them to court? I mean, I'm going to do that, obviously. So, we'll just deal with it as it comes and just never let it go.
Absolutely. For us, my husband and I, we always said, in Life's Little Instruction booklets, there was a page where it said, when going after Moby Dick, pack the tartar sauce. And whenever we were in hard times, I would always go buy a jar of tartar sauce and I would put it up on the ledge and I would go, we're not quitting until we get Moby Dick here, whatever it was. But the stress cannot be denied. Yeah. And I hope for a time that, the city on the hill, where when a child is diagnosed with autism, that parents are given good information right away, and that they're given access to things that are right for that individual, which is not one size fits all, and that nobody has to fight over it. Yep. And I hope that someday we're going to get to that. And we've got a couple of minutes, Jim. I know one of the other things that we were hoping, if we had time, was to talk about everything that you've been through in terms of living in one place, moving to another, starting ABA, picking a clinic, and how it's got to be the right fit. And if you can give some advice to parents about how you guys did that, I think we'd both love to hear that. Wouldn't we, Nancy?
Yes, please.
Yeah, for me, what is the right fit for, I feel like what is the right fit for my son is a clinic that puts an emphasis on measuring and reporting. I want to have a monthly meeting with the BCBA. I want that meeting to be, I want 2 days before that meeting to get the written report and all the plots. I want to go over the plots. I'm going to send you questions the night before, so you have time to think about how you're going to answer them. And then on the day of the meeting, let's just rip through it and get it done. In and out in 15 minutes if we have to, it's fine. But let's give me some time to catch up to where you are as a BCBA, and give you some time to really think about the questions that I have. So that kind of relationship is maybe a little more demanding than most parents. That's kind of the relationship that I require of a clinic. And unfortunately, there was a handful of clinics that we went to that just the measurement wasn't rigorous enough, or the therapy wasn't generalizable enough. We weren't talking about the same thing. I mean, they would, playtime is great so long as we're Yeah, and pairing with your RBT is absolutely required, sure. But, it needs to be constructive, and you need to be sitting there with a clicker, or you need to be sitting there with your iPad taking notes as you're going. And we need to agree on what is the behavior we're targeting, how are we trying to measure success, and how are we going to know if we need to change tack, midway through this. We need to, it has to be based on a scientific method, and if it's not, then it's really not worth my son's time. But, and you've said this before, which is, there's a lot of studies that say that 40 hours are effective, and there are no studies that say that 20 hours are effective. And an ABA clinic, unfortunately, there's a shortage of RBTs right now, just nationwide, and it's difficult to get the hours that you've maybe even gotten approved for by your insurance company. So another big thing is make sure that you're on a list, and you're also not just on that list and not just going to get some hours. Don't take me off the list if I'm going to get 10 hours. I'll stay where I am now and get the 35 that I'm getting. So it requires understanding what ABA therapy is, and knowing what's a good fit for you, and then fighting for it.
Absolutely. Amen to that. It's hard though. It's really, really hard. And I think for a lot of people, when in the beginning, if you don't know what it is that you're looking for, like you went looking for the thing, and I really want to apologize to you because I think my book is more of the pep talk that you said you weren't looking for. But I would tell you that the book that I recommend, if you're not looking for the pep talk, if you're looking for the how-to, we just had Dr. Mary Barbara Lynch on the show, and her book, Turn Autism Around. I'd love for you to take a look at that, Jim, because she's a mom who became a BCBA. She was an RN and became a BCBA, and is trying to help parents to understand what you need to do to get from point A to point Z. And I have a mission, Nancy does as well, that we try to give information to families that will be useful to them. I am always I think, we're both fans of ABA, Nancy, but I think I'm a little bit more of a fan of that intensive, but probably because I got it, and I got it at the right time. And so my whole life is a testament to what's possible when you get it at the right time and the right intensity. And I see, it's very scary to me right now how many people, we fought so hard, Nancy, didn't we, for people to be able to get access to what they have access to now. And there's parents who are just turning it down. They're being offered 35 hours of ABA, and they're like, 15 is fine. 15 sounds like a lot. He's only 3, never knowing that equation is not shown scientifically anywhere to be effective for a 3-year-old. 15 hours won't help your child in the way that you're hoping that it will.
Yeah. There's the Early Start Denver model study, and early intervention studies have shown that it's better than nothing, but it's definitely not as good as 40 hours. I mean, it's not. Yeah. For me, it had to be the full 40, and it's a lot for my son. It felt like a lot as a parent, but
How do you guys manage it? Because you've got other kids, and so for the people who are watching, are like, great, but how do you do it? How do you guys manage?
My wife does it. She is the workhorse. I mean, it's a priority for us. We plan vacations around it. We make sure that if there's a lake house party or something this weekend, we're all going down on Thursday. Now we're going to be there Friday night. So it's absolutely our priority. So it's just the way it has to be.
Well, you say that your wife is doing it, then maybe tell us, because maybe the other dads need to hear this. How do you support her? Because I know I interviewed your husband once, Nancy, and he said, how are you getting this done? And he said, it's her, it's all her. And that every day he prayed that it said that when he would say to you, when you would leave the house, he would say, don't die. don't die. And I know broke his heart. I don't know if you know, Jim, that her husband passed away several years ago, and it was the thing that one of the last things he said to me was, I don't want to leave her alone with this. But so tell other dads, Jim, how do you support your wife through this as she's being the project manager?
Yeah, I mean, she's the project manager, and I'm happy to take time off if if John needs to go from uh, speech and PT over to ABA in the middle of the day. If that's just how the schedule is going to work, then fine. I'm quick to use whatever PTO I can to do that. But it also kind of just boils down to I'm there for all the meetings, and I like to be there for and I like to be on the same page as to this is if this is the schedule or if these are the goals that we're trying to hit in ABA for this period, then I want to know what the program is so that I can start to implement it at night, so that when I get done with work, I can go up and take John in a corner and we'll work on the program ourselves. And to give her that break is, I mean, that's really all I can do. But she's with him all day, every day.
Amazing.
Jim, tell us if you had advice to give fathers from your perspective now, what would it be? What would your advice be to fathers?
I'm a huge proponent of ABA. And again, that might be controversial, but I think it's crucial. So get into ABA as quickly as you can. Get as many hours as you can. You can get 40 hours. It doesn't matter what insurance tells you. You can get 40 hours. And when you're dealing with insurance or the school, these are good people. They're doing their jobs. They're not out to get you. They're your partners. So be, respectful and polite and treat them like they're your, compatriots in this battle. But at the same time, be stern and go after what you want. Don't back down. I mean, you have an obligation to get it done for your kid. And you mentioned in your book, what if everybody, went after those 40 hours and everybody stood up and everybody said, well, I want, ABA for my kid in school. What if everybody did this? Then there would be a crisis. Well, let's do it, because
let's bring it on.
These kids need it.
Oh, you are my kind of dad, Jim. Let's create the crisis.
Yeah.
Because I think what's happening is insurance is creating quite the other crisis, where our kids are not getting enough. And then I see what happens as a result of that the services aren't there later on. And there is a crisis right now in the field of ABA, and we are starting to see ABA providers that are ceasing to be, because insurance has made the game in such a way, and nobody has trained the parents to fight back. So, man, love what you're doing, and you just opened a whole new can of worms for a whole bunch of people. One last question for you, because we're almost out of time, is how are you communicating your needs effectively with your employers so that you keep your job, aren't losing anything, because heaven knows you want to keep this insurance, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I'm not a person who's bashful about telling, whether it's people at school or other parents or my employer, that my son has autism. It's not something to be ashamed of. This is the state of affairs. Let's talk about it. So I've communicated it to him. I've spoken to, and it's kind of a small company. There's like 100 of us, but I've talked to, HR specifically about this battle, and they reached out to help me with a private insurance advocate. So I'm lucky to be at the employer I am, that I'm at, and they've been very good to me. But really, I haven't asked for too much time or anything, because Mary Kate's been doing all the work. So
okay,
I pitch in what I can.
But I love that you're communicating it. That's so important. Well, amazing. And of course, we want to say a big shout out to Julie Cornack,
yes,
who has been on the show before. and has been working, and she does have pins that she gives out that say MAPIA on them, which is the mental health parity. I can't remember all the other letters, but the important part is that it is a basis for you, no matter if you live in a state that says, oh, we only give ABA services to age 7. A lot of times MAPIA has you covered. It has your back for a plethora of things. And so we give a big shout out to Julie Kornack for, first of all, the work that she's been doing. Second, for stepping in and getting back to you and getting you the tools that you needed to go to people to help you to get it done. And third, for introducing you to us so that we could have you here on the show and share this vital information.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Jim. You're a real inspiration to autism dads everywhere. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
And us. Thank you so much for being with us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And we're really out of time, Nancy, but I just wanted to take a second and thank you. And what a great dad. I get so excited when I hear parents, because, a lot of times we give information to parents and they're too overwhelmed.
Right.
They're too overwhelmed. And that's not a judgment. That's just, I've gotten advice. I can remember Lisa Ackerman giving me advice and me going, and then leaving and not taking that advice for 4 years. And her being very kind and generous with me and saying, when are you going to get around to that? It's important. When you do, you're going to be sorry you didn't do it sooner. And she was right. But I was too overwhelmed in the moment to do what it was that she was telling me to do. So you do what you can when you can, but it's such a joy to be with a parent who's like, I'm going to get it done.
Yes, he was a real go-getter.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Anything you can tell us about the rest of the week? Or
well, tomorrow on the show, we're replaying, we've been doing monthly stories from the spectrum. This is the new show, Nancy, where it's only content created by people who are on the spectrum or consider themselves neurodiverse. So we had episode 4 dropped last Friday, and we're going to replay that tomorrow. And I hope, here's the thing, I just want people to support it. It is, for so long, for 10 years, people told us they loved Autism Live, but they wanted to hear more from people who were on the spectrum. We are making that happen with that show, giving all kinds of people on the spectrum a voice. And we're like, where's the support for that? So we hope that you'll watch it. We hope that you'll share it, because it's important. It's absolutely important. So that's what's happening tomorrow. And then we'll be back next week with our live shows. Got a lot of fun stuff going on.
Okay, Shannon, thank you. Sounds great. Let's make sure people support Stories from the Spectrum. Really
and 2 quick things that I want to say. Next week, season 3 of Lock and Key drops with Kobe Bird. So I want to be telling everybody this week and get caught up on 1 and 2 if you haven't seen them, or rewatch them, because we're going to be talking about Lock and Key. And Nancy, have you seen the new K-drama from Korea? It's the #1 rated Korean show. It's called Extraordinary Attorney Woo.
Yeah.
I think you'll like it. You'll like it. It's on Netflix.
Okay.
It's super fun. Super fun. Anyway, all right. So that's all for today. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And yourselves a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.